It's a bit of like a humbling lesson for me too, because I think a lot of people, 10% of Bitcoin is actually now held by institutions.
It's funny. I used to, whenever someone would say Bitcoin's not backed by anything, I'd say, well, before I address that, what do you think is the most valuable commodity in the world? And they would say gold or oil or, whatever. And I would say, well, those are all valuable, obviously, but I think the most valuable commodity is computing power. And Bitcoin happens to be backed by computing power. Right. And so it may be hard to think through this, but it's actually commodity backed, currency. And you could just see some people were like, okay, you're crazy. Some people were like, you sound stupid. And then every once in a while you would meet someone and they were like, I never really thought about computing power as a commodity, but like, yeah. Now when I tell people that, they're like, oh, of course, like I've seen the electricity, charts, right? I've seen the, the AI data center investment charts. Like this is very valuable.
Yeah. No, it's a bit of like a humbling lesson for me too, because I think a lot of people in social media in the community think of me as like a very quanty person, right? Like they think I'm a mathy guy.
Are you saying this is my quant?
It probably doesn't help that I'm Asian. Let's be honest. And I am good at math, so I will own it. But many people don't actually know that when I first got to Stanford, I chose to be a philosophy major. And the one thing
blasphemous. Why would you ever?
Well, the thing is, I think also people don't know this, but my good colleague and friend, Matt Hugin, was a philosophy major. And a lot of times when people are just moved by how Matt is so eloquently able to put together disparate concepts in a very cohesive way that makes it relatable, I revisited kind of all my earnest interests in my earlier years about what philosophy in itself represents. And I think it is maybe also like a counter movement to how technical like the world is becoming, where we're just kind of losing touch a little bit with the things that matter. But this is where I think the lines are being redrawn. I remember walking into my classroom. I was 17 years old, and the professor, put like, a grain of rice on the table and was like, "Is this a heap?" And I was like, "No, it's a grain of rice." And he was like, he puts another grain. He's like, "Is this a heap?" And he's like, "No, it's still 2 specks of rice." And basically, the point you're trying to make was, when does it become a heap? Like how many specks of these rice we have to put together to convert it into a heap? And of course I walked out because I was like, oh my God, this is not why I came here. I didn't come here all the way to like learn about rice becoming a heap. Like I have plenty of rice at home. Like I don't need to be a part of this. But I look at that memory with great kind of enamorment, because it shows you that these kinds of conversations about what like value and quality in itself is can actually be even reflected in that exercise of a heap of rice.
Well, talk a little bit as to kind of like philosophically how you think through this view as we're kind of putting this together.
Yeah, I think I saw recently that about 10% of Bitcoin is actually now held by institutions. These are governments and public companies for the most part. And when you double click on it, what's actually more fascinating is that there's only like 115 entities or so that constitutes the top 7%. So it's actually early in terms of the counts of institutions relative to the ownership of the Bitcoin network, which signals something. There's still a lot of opportunity for more companies to come online and buy Bitcoin. But what companies will then do with them will be really different going forward. I think we're used to thinking about the Bitcoin treasury company by the way Saylor has defined it as kind of the de facto base case. But I think that's one version of it. And I think there's things to appreciate there about the possibilities of financializing Bitcoin exposure for the institutional investor. And it's been wildly successful. But that's not really the kind of embodiment at the core of like making Bitcoin in itself more productively useful for the actual gains to be had for society, right? And so the thing that keeps me up a little bit at night with a lot of excitement and a lot of ability to think about what synergies could exist out of Bitcoin is not just Bitcoin accumulation. Of course, acquiring Bitcoin per share is the driving metric for which people will be enthused today. But a close cousin of that is operating revenue that can then also acquire Bitcoin more creatively on the balance sheet, right? So if you can just determine Bitcoin as the unit of account for which you want your valuation of the balance sheet to exist, then the goal is to actually generate revenue to increase the balance sheet in itself. And the nice thing about Bitcoin as an ideology is that if it works, you can basically reduce what is one of the highest cost center of any operating business, which is customer acquisition. Most of the businesses spend an inordinate amount of money on marketing, on distribution, and all the ways. I mean, even the case with how Coinbase and Circle, right, is set up in their JV for USDC shows you the power Coinbase has over Circle in the take rate. So distribution's everything. But the nice thing is, if you're a Bitcoin treasury co that can earn the goodwill of your customers being your shareholders who are ideologically aligned for Bitcoin adjacent businesses, you can attack that vector in a very cost efficient way, right? That gives you an unfair advantage. That gives you a chance to acquire different kinds of businesses or build different kinds of businesses where only you can actually exercise that premium as your customers, then therefore being your shareholders. And I think that is really what I think about a lot when the idea of the Berkshire Hathaway of Bitcoin coming to be, which is the synergy that arises out of that network effect of having your shareholders also being your customers to potentially the businesses that they're also invested in.